Alright guys, so here's the Accord, the engine's out. I also took the subframe out off screen, and I took the exhaust off, and now the wagon is in the garage ready to be worked on. On the Accord, the exhaust took me quite a bit to take it off because the subframe was putting pressure on it. So now when I start on the TSX, I'm going to start with the exhaust. And here we are removing the exhaust. First thing you gotta do is remove all the brackets that are holding the exhaust up, and you just gotta be patient with it. Using a pry bar worked for me. Here I am releasing the exhaust off the header, and more brackets, as you can see. I was actually surprised it was not as hard as the Accord exhaust. The Accord, taking those bolts off was very tough. Alright, here we are. The exhaust is finally off. And I just gotta slide it out from under the car. Now I'm starting with the suspension, getting rid of the axles and the brake calipers, and just releasing all that so I can slide the axles out. Secured the brake caliper and bracket up to the body of the car. Now I'm removing the lower ball joint. I decided to remove the suspension fork off the steering knuckle to give me a little bit more play. I tried several times to remove this ball joint. It ended up not being successful, so I moved on to the upper ball joint. First thing you gotta do is remove that cotter pin. It was rusted in place, so I had to pry it out with vice grips, and then using a breaker bar I was able to loosen the upper ball joint nut, and with the ball joint removal tool I was able to finally remove the upper ball joint. Here we are trying on the lower one again, but the ball joint removal tool just keeps popping off, so I decided to instead remove the suspension first. Here I am removing the nuts holding down the sway bar on the passenger side, and then the driver's side. Once all those nuts are removed, you are able to remove the upper sway bar. And here I am removing the passenger side strut tower. Moving on to the driver's side, starting with the axle bolt, and then the suspension fork, followed by the brake caliper and bracket. Gotta secure that to the body so it doesn't fall. I should have done a better job because it does end up falling. Here I am removing the upper ball joint. It's the same exact thing as the other side. Camera angle is not great, but it is what it is. Removing the suspension fork, and now removing the upper ball joint. There you go, it popped off and took the caliper with it. Now I'm removing the top of the strut tower, just like I did on the passenger side. And now I'm removing the axle out of the steering knuckle. Now I'll move on below the car to drain the oil. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to do washers or anything like that. I didn't do that. I even reused the same filter because I'm gonna end up selling this engine. I don't need to install a new filter. Now I'm removing the lower transmission anchors. And now I gotta drain the radiator fluid. After that's done, start back at the top of the engine bay, removing the battery and the airbox. Here we are removing the battery tray that the battery was sitting on top of. And now I'm working on the intake so that I can get the air box out. You take the top off first, and then you're able to unscrew the bottom part of the air box so it lifts away. This is me removing the ECU. Now I want to start removing the radiator. To do that, you got to take off the front cover, the top cover first. Release the hose. There's an upper hose, a lower hose, and then the reservoir hose. I used a little nail, like a smooth nail, to break the seal between the hoses and the receptors. So once those are off, you can start to unscrew the radiator clips. And remove other parts of the air intake. The radiator and the AC cooler are connected to each other. So here I am removing the AC line off the top and bottom off the AC cooler, and once they're loose, you are able to remove out the whole thing as an assembly. Now I'm removing something from the front of the engine. To be honest, I did this a year ago. I have no idea what it is that I'm removing. It looks like it might be related to the engine mount, but I'm not 100% sure. So just know you have to remove something off the front of the engine. Now I gotta remove the AC line, and then all the hoses that connect to the top of the engine. And you gotta keep looking around to make sure that there's nothing connected. You've got the heater hoses, and then once I'm done with the heater hoses, I start working on removing the harness, just disconnecting anything that connects the engine to the body of the car. In order to remove the harness, you do have to go into the fuse box so you can release the battery terminals. That's what connects the battery into the fuse box to give power to the whole system. So you got to go in, release the terminals, keep the screws so you don't lose them, and then replace the cover, and you can proceed in removing whatever parts of the harness you need to disconnect the engine from the body. Next is the fuel line. It's pretty easy to take off, and you just keep on taking off hoses, making sure that you are fully disconnected between the back of the engine and the body. Now we're under to remove the axles. You just got to use a pry bar and some leverage from a hammer to pry it out. Then I hooked up the engine to put tension on it so that I can start removing the connections to the body mounts. Here I am releasing the front engine mount and then the rear engine mount. Then you got to do the passenger side and the driver's side. The driver's side, I ended up taking the whole bracket out. I couldn't just disconnect it because of the way that it just layered on top of each other. But it wasn't much harder, just 3 more bolts and then it's out. I started to try and remove the engine, but it wouldn't come, and that's how I discovered that the rear engine mount, you have to disconnect it completely. So the back of the engine has a roll restrictor that you have to completely disengage. I thought I had done it, but it turns out I didn't. So I had to go in from the wheel well in order to remove that bolt. It was a big bolt, and then I pried it off, and finally it came loose, and I'm able to now loosen the engine completely and start lifting it out clear of the car. Here it is, it's now going up, and just gotta make sure that there's nothing hitting anything. Make sure, I think I had forgotten a hose there, so I got rid of that hose, and there you go, engine is going up. Then lowered the body all the way out. And there it is. The K24 is out of the TSX wagon. And now the next thing I gotta do is remove the subframe and the rack and pinion. Here we are inside the driver's footwell. You gotta remove the cover that covers where the steering rack goes into the rack and pinion. You will end up removing some of the interior panels just to get better access, but the rack and pinion is held by a couple of bolts, nothing crazy. Just hard to reach in there because of the awkward angles, but with some tools you're able to finally get it done. Back in the engine bay, I have to disconnect the EPS. I am not interested in having EPS on the wagon anymore, so I want to disconnect all the wires, and the EPS rack and pinion is gonna go down with the subframe. So you gotta just remove some of the shielding. Keep all the bolts, remove all the wiring, and then you gotta release the bracket so the subframe can drop. Under the subframe there are 4 bolts that hold it into place, and then above it there are these 4 bolts that kind of guide it into place to make sure it doesn't go left and right, I guess. So you gotta release those, and you'll see how the subframe drops a little bit. There you go. And since I had disengaged the rack and pinion off the steering rack, the whole thing just comes down nice and easy, and there it is. Thank you for watching.